if you wait to find time to pray when you have nothing else to do, you are never going to pray. Is it a priority, or do we fit it in when we have nothing else to do? And for leaders, if we wait until we have nothing else to do, we will never pray. But it was so interesting to look at the prayer life of Jesus, who had a lot to do. Jesus had limited time, and yet it says Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed.
Welcome to Divine Revelations Unleashed. On today's episode, we have the honor of having Peter Greer on the podcast, and we're going to be talking about his newest book release that he co-authored with Ryan and Cameron called Lead with Prayer: The Spiritual Habits of World-Changing Leaders. And we're going to take a deep dive into, they talked to several leaders all across the globe in different areas, pastors, business leaders, people in education, people in politics, talking about the spiritual habits that really keeps them faith-centered and their focus on God and their faith. And so we're going to take a deep dive into this new book called Lead with Prayer. And just to tell you a little bit about Peter, Peter is leading Hope International. And what Hope International is, it's a global Christ-centered organization that's working towards alleviating physical and spiritual poverty in more than 20 countries across the globe. So really hope that you enjoy this conversation that I had with Peter, and we'll catch you at the end of the podcast to let you know how to get your copy of Lead with Prayer. So hope you enjoy this episode with Peter. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Been looking forward to it.
Yeah, awesome. I really have been enjoying taking a deep dive into your latest book that you co-authored with some of your friends, Ryan and Cameron. And so for those listening, they just came out with a book called Lead with Prayer: The Spiritual Habits of World-Changing Leaders. Peter, congratulations on this book launch.
Thanks. As you know, you work on something for a long time and then you actually get to see it and share it with friends. And it just has been so much fun to share this book, share its message with others. So yeah, been an absolute joy.
Yeah, it's been an awesome book to take a deep dive into. And as we were talking before we hit the record button, is this specific book has been probably the most unique because there's a lot of leadership and faith books out there, and sometimes they combine with each other. But this one is really talking about the spiritual habits of a leader, and I never really even thought about that. Like, there are so many leaders that are recognized and that you went and talked to and interviewed with your co-authors, and where I wanted to start the conversation is, what was your real heart behind this book? Because I think it's so unique, and I want to know kind of the like what really sparked this to pursue this venture of writing a book on Lead with Prayer.
Well, Cameron, you're completely right. How many books have we read on leadership? You can tell the habits of leaders. You know the daily schedule of leaders. You know what they take. You know their exercise routines. There is so much that you can find out about leaders, but we couldn't find out what are the prayer habits of these world-changing leaders. And it's something that perhaps because it is seen more as a personal deal, but there wasn't a lot that was written. I mean, there was a lot about prayer. There's a lot of books on leadership, but actually the intentional bringing together these two different sides and saying, what are the prayer habits of leaders? And we had the incredible gift of interviewing global leaders. The work that I do with Hope International, we work in 24 countries around the world, and I have seen the commitment to prayer. I have seen, but I never really sat down and said, tell me more. Go that layer deeper. What is it that you have done to become a leader who prays? And really, the genesis of the book was Ryan Skoog, my friend and co-author. He was the one who said, I really want to write this book on the prayer habits of world-changing leaders. And when he reached out, Cameron, I said, that sounds like an amazing book, but that's not one that I'm going to write because I felt like I was so new at this. What does it look like to be someone who incorporates this deep sense of prayer. But I am so grateful that after a little bit of prayer, did actually decide this is going to be an amazing journey and not to miss it. But yeah, that's the story. It was Ryan reaching out and saying, let's research, let's write a book that explores the prayer habits of these amazing leaders that we've been so privileged to know.
Well, awesome. I want to start off with a verse that you mentioned in the book. It's Jeremiah 9:23-24, and I'll read it for those that are listening. Don't let the wise boast in their wisdom, or the powerful boast in their power, or the rich boast in their riches. But those who wish to boast should boast in this alone, that they truly know me. I just loved how you started out the introduction with this verse. And not only that, but you started off the book by talking about how leaders truly have a prayer problem. I want to take some time if you want to unpack that. Like, why is this? Why is it that based on the conversation that you and your co-authors had with these with these global leaders that have so much influence, why do leaders have such a prayer problem today?
Yeah, so I think there's several of the most common reasons why leaders don't pray, and instead of talking just in generalities, I will say these were some of the challenges that I had about really prioritizing prayer. But the first is I just feel really busy, and if you wait to find time to pray when you have nothing else to do, you are never going to pray. So, is it a priority, or do we fit it in when we have nothing else to do? And for leaders, if we wait until we have nothing else to do, we will never pray. But it was so interesting to look at the prayer life of Jesus, who had a lot to do. Jesus had limited time, and yet it says Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. The night before Jesus went to the cross, what is he found doing? He said to his closest friends, "Hey, let's go pray." um, and and he prioritized. What did he do before he chose his disciples? He spent all night in prayer. And so we see in the life of Jesus a different level of what is it that caused Jesus to pray? And if anyone had the excuse of, I'm too busy, Jesus had lines of people waiting to be healed. He had limited time, and yet he prioritized time with his heavenly Father. So I think that's the first thing is, do we think we're busier than Jesus? I mean, in how we actually live. Second thing is that maybe we think that we've got this on our own. There was one study that was done, and the conclusion was this: in latter ministry years, individuals tend to rely on their own competency as opposed to relying on Christ. I've got this. I know how to do this. I know how to set up a strategic plan. I know how to do a compelling vision. I really don't need God's help. So, God, here's my prayer. I got this for now. Maybe I'll reach out if I get stuck. That is a very different approach to prayer. And so maybe we're thinking a little too highly of us, or maybe we're having a little too small goals of what we're trying to do. And then maybe the third one is, maybe for some of us, we prayed and it didn't work. God didn't answer the prayer in the way that we wanted or in the timeline that we wanted it. And I just found it so interesting to have the interview with Johnny Erickson Tata, and just this incredible way that she has not had her prayers answered for her physical healing, but there was no question she had encountered Christ in her pain. And she said, that is better than the healing. That is ecstasy beyond ecstasy. And so I think maybe for some of us, we might need to expand what it is that we're praying for. Might have a greater element of, God, this is not my own choosing. This is not what I want, but I trust you, and help me to experience you as I'm going through this really difficult time. Anyway, I could go on, but I think those are some of the common barriers that cause us to not prioritize prayer.
Yeah, I wanted to expand on the second one that you said is when you were talking about how leaders they lean on their own understanding and their own will, and they think, "Oh, I don't need prayer because they have all this success, they have all this influence, they have all these followers, all the events that they're speaking at, or whatever that might be." I mean, you and your co-authors spoke to a long list of leaders, and some of these people. I'm sure they had moments where they tried to do it on their own. They tried to do it on their will, but then realized that they couldn't. They had to surrender in prayer. And I think prayer is something that is often overlooked, especially when, and this is an issue in my life too, being a person of in leadership roles at a young age. It gets to your head, and then you're like, oh, I've made it. I don't need prayer anymore. I don't need prayer. And then you realize over time, it you come to a point where you're like, oh yeah, I need to go back to prayer. I need to have and develop these spiritual habits, to be continue to be a leader of influence or success, whatever that might look like.
Oh, you're exactly right. And the question is, what happens when our influence goes up and our prayerfulness goes down?
Mm-hmm.
That is the pattern for many leaders, including King Solomon. He started out so well with this commitment, and yet over time drifted on that. And I think in that gap is a lot of challenge, a lot of pain when our influence goes up, and then slowly, just as you started with the verse in Jeremiah, it's like, hey, I got the riches, I got the power, I got the wisdom. I really don't need you. So and yet Jesus says something pretty stark in the other. He said, apart from me, you can accomplish a little bit. No, he said, apart from me, you can do nothing. And so I think prayer is this recalibration, this constant recalibration to say, God, unless you show up, it is not going to amount to a whole lot. So Lord, help. I love that prayer. Lord, help.
Yeah, I also wanted to touch on the third point that you mentioned on, when your prayers don't get answered, and I think this is the big one as well. Is, you pray for that promotion, you pray for that next job interview, whatever that might be, you pray for that next church campus, and it doesn't happen. And it can be really hard to really swallow that pill, is when something that you really, really want, and maybe you thought you were prepared for it, and then God doesn't answer it, and bitterness sets in. And then you're like, why is God really there? It's like, I was so ready for this promotion. I was ready to relocate. I was ready. I've been working for the last, 5 years. How do leaders handle this?
Yeah, I mean, the question is, what is God big enough to handle our a candid conversation?
Mhm.
And we would say, yeah, you look in scripture, and I think there's this incredible invitation. But I think at the end of it, I mean, Psalms is the book of prayer, right? There are the whole book is just this constant conversation, and there's a lot of very real and raw emotions in there and things that don't make sense. God, what is going on? I sure wish you would do this. But so many of them end with a almost like a reminder at the end. But my ways, not your ways. I don't see all the things that you do. And so help me to be a child who trusts more than a leader who understands everything. And I think that posture of God, here's what I'm feeling. I'm going to pour everything out. I'm going to absolutely tell you everything that's going on. And I trust you. Help me experience you in the midst of this. And it's so interesting. Again, you look at Psalm 23. Psalm 23 starts out in the third person. It starts out, the Lord is my shepherd.
Mm.
And then it shifts, and it shifts from talking about the Lord to you. And when does that shift happen? For you are with me. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me. That's when it goes from the Lord to you. It goes to that personal. And that's what we heard from so many individuals, that even in the midst of really challenging situations where all prayers are not answered, there still is this experience of being with Christ. And the leaders that we interviewed, Cameron, it was crazy. Like that was enough, more than the answered prayer. And so I think how we look at this, some talked about prayers about friendship first, prayers about wasting time with God, prayers about experiencing the presence of Christ. That was Brother Lawrence's book from a long time ago, The Practice of the Presence of Christ. And again, it just has so blown my mind from this is not just about here's what I want in the timeline that I want it, bless me, Lord. It is so much more than that. It's God, I trust you in relationship, walking walking, almost like we read about in the book of Genesis, where Adam and Eve got to walk with God in a very real sense. Prayer is so much more than just the here's what I want in the timeline that I want it. Bless me, Lord. There is so much more to explore. And that's really what we heard with these leaders that had a life that was defined by prayer. It was friendship first, and it was woven throughout their day, and it was actual friendship, not just, yeah, here's what I want you to do for me, Lord.
Hmm. With the leaders that you spoke with, why did these leaders feel that their prayer life and spiritual habits were at the forefront of in that helped support their growth, their leadership, their their life journey? Why do they keep that at the forefront?
Yeah, I guess the way that I saw it was they enjoyed it, Cameron. Like
Mm,
they actually enjoyed prayer was not this drudgery or duty. Sometimes it required that, but they moved to a place where it actually was not, I should pray, but it was, I cannot believe that the God of the universe, the God who made all of this that we see, the God who made from the little flowers to the animals that who made all of this wants to be in relationship with me. That is mind blowing. I can't believe that I get to pray to the God who made all of this. Like that's it wasn't duty. It was delight. It wasn't I really should pray. It was I can't believe we get to pray. So why did they do it? I think they truly enjoyed the practice of the presence of God and being in relationship, being led by the Holy Spirit, and coming before the God of the universe and being able to pour everything that is going on in their heart and soul out. And how many leaders are just carrying so much internally? And what
yeah.
would happen if those leaders just came with true candor, true honesty, and said, God, I really need some help because I'm carrying some stuff right now. Come to me, all you who are weary, heavy laden, and I will give you rest. They experience that rest. So yeah, this is, and again, I feel like I'm in the kiddie end of the pool. There is so much more depth to explore, but I've had just a few tastes over the last couple of years working on this book, and I think there is, yeah, there is joy, not obligation, if we really do go on this journey of prayer together.
Mm. I wanted to talk about your process in writing the book. You mentioned it took a couple of years to really embark on this journey. Talk a little bit about the process of writing this book and doing all the interviews. What process did you and your co-authors go through?
Yeah, I mean, so it really was similar to what we see in Jim Collins with his, model of reaching out to those that we know and saying, who are those people that have really had a life that has been shaped by prayer and lead organizations? And then we started having conversations in that and tried to understand what is it that they believe, what is it that they practice, and how is that different from me and from those that really struggle with prayer. And then it was hearing. You kind of start to hear, and it was amazing. The practices started to sound very similar, even though this is across a variety of different geographies globally. The practices sounded similar. And then for us, it was let's do it. If we're going to write about it, let's actually do it ourselves. And there were many of these practices that we just had never tried before and said, let's try it out. And it was so much fun to just be on this journey together. And we really do encourage people. Writing this book, it was not just Ryan and Cameron, but it also was Jill Heisey. And it was a different experience because we were practicing these principles together. And in a similar way, we really encourage those. If you're going to read the book, please do it with a couple friends. It will be a different experience as you are putting these ideas into practice. So everything that we had, I mean, every chapter, it's, hey, try it. See if this helps in your prayer life. Just try it. And if it works, if it's helpful for you, great. And if not, move right on to the next chapter. Try some new ways. And again, our journey, every single one of us, we would say our prayer life has been shaped by these practices. And the other thing you ask about who we interviewed, I was so blown away by the graciousness of people that we reached out to. I mean, John Mark Comer, so kind and spending so much time focusing on what does this look like to have these ancient practices, and John Erickson Tata and Francis Chang and Gary Haugen from the International Justice Mission, but then also some global leaders that maybe the names might not be familiar, but people were so open-handed in sharing, this is the journey I'm on. These are some of the tools that I've used, and try it. And that really has just been such a generous group of friends that share. So everything in the book is kind of just our listening, learning, and synthesizing what we heard from a remarkable group of leaders who have figured out what it looks like to lead with prayer.
Yeah, that's awesome to have that all combined into one book. What was some of the things that really surprised you and your co-authors throughout the journey of doing these interviews, talking to leaders, pastors, and what were some of the things that surprised you?
Yeah, I think the first thing, just as I, you know, shared, is just they sounded similar. And then you start looking throughout history, and it was so amazing to see these practices. I just think, to me, I just maybe it's because we think we know how to pray, or maybe it's because we don't, I don't know, have a lot of kind of insights into this, but it just was amazing how consistent they were. But the second piece, and kind of related to that, is I also was impressed with all these leaders. They did not fit prayer into the moments that they had nothing to do. They built their days around prayer. And that is a completely different way of going about your day. Um, Saying, this is how I'm going to start my day. This is what I'm going to do on a daily basis. This is what I'm going to do on a weekly basis. This is what I'm going to do on a monthly basis. And this is what I'm going to do on an annual basis. And so they had a plan. They worked at prayer. And I don't know, maybe this is just me, but I kind of thought like prayer should just be natural or easy. But then I think about all the relationships in my life. What relationship just simply gets better without work and time and attention? And I think our prayer life, maybe we take it for granted, or maybe, yeah, maybe it's just a different understanding. But with a little more structure, with a little more of these tools, I really think it's possible for everyone to grow with prayer. And that's not just individual, Cameron. Like, we've been going through this journey at Hope International. We do poverty alleviation, 24 countries around the world, savings groups and microfinance. And it's been so much fun to learn with and to have some different new prayer habits, new prayer practices that the whole Hope International team around the world has been joining in. Well, maybe our names are on the book. There's a lot more people that have contributed to this, and a lot of other people that we are working alongside have been putting these ideas into practice and shaping the way that we talk about them. So yeah, anyway, there's a personal application, there's a organizational application, but the common theme is like they work at it. It takes time and intentionality to have a vibrant prayer life.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you said it best. Is it takes intentionality to build that prayer life. Like you mentioned, I really like what you talked about just now. Is building your day around your prayer life, and I think that's so essential, especially for when we're talking to leaders. Is oftentimes leaders get just so busy. I mean, once Monday starts, and we're talking on a Monday, once Monday morning starts, people just go, go, go. And then Friday happens. And, they may not have had the proper spiritual habits or the right structures in place for themselves to be able to make that a priority, and not really, trying to squeeze in 5 minutes here or 5 minutes there, and not really having it the foundation of their day, or the way they walk on a day to day. And that's so key to build that prayer life as a foundation. And then you see the fruits of it in your week.
No, well said. And I think that last piece is really important. You can track the difference. In the organizations that prioritize prayer, there was less stress. Not surprising, right? You actually, in the midst of your day, are reminded about God's presence. That's going to take some of the weight off. And so there actually are measurable impact. That's not the reason why we do it, but it certainly, there are real outcomes as a result going on this prayer journey as a leader, but also as an organization.
Mm. What I wanted to chat with you on, because when leaders, the walking in faith is not an easy journey, and that's well known for those that are listening, that are believers. And oftentimes we can get drifted off into our work, the what we do, and lose sight of faith at times. There's seasons, that might. How did these leaders keep themselves centered in faith and always make sure that they're walking with the Lord, walking in Christ, in their daily lives? Because this is a big issue, or big pain point, I think, in a lot of leaders in faith that I see, in that they struggle in keeping God at the center, and it often becomes something that's at a low priority for them.
Yeah. And again, I kind of think about just the journey that we've been on. One of the key pieces, perhaps, is just I think sometimes we might have lost the gift of confession and repentance as part of our prayer life. And so I don't I don't know many things that get better by keeping them hidden. I don't know many issues that just go away on their own by ignoring them. And maybe this is one of the ancient practices that we've forgotten is the more that we actually remember who we're praying to, the only one that is perfect, you start being aware of, I mean, even when it comes to this, oh man, my mind just wanders. Lord, help me remember. What a significant moment this is. And finding the more you're aware of that, then there's just this more awareness of grace in the midst of that too. And I think that again, you ask, how can we make sure that we actually do prioritize this? The more that we understand our need, our dependence, and the
Mm.
more that we understand unbelievable, limitless grace and forgiveness, um, and then you have this whole other piece of, and we believe that God actually does guide and direct in the day-to-day decisions. How many decisions, if we had prayed about them, would have been different decisions that would have caused less pain for us and those that we love, the organizations that we lead. And so I don't know. I just I feel like the biggest piece on that is they just try it. They just try it and they experience these little bits of like that actually dramatically improves my life, my leadership, my family life. Like there is real benefit. And maybe that is what ultimately leads to joy. Like again, not I should pray more. I can't believe I get to pray. Like that's where I want to live.
Mm.
Yeah, beyond the duty of it to just the joy of having a conversation with the one who knows me fully.
Yeah, and I think I just pulled out my sermon notes from yesterday, from church, is where they were talking about trusting God, and I think we have to have the confidence and trust in God. And they talked about trust yesterday, trusting in someone's ability that you don't have. It's
So
like,
good. Yeah.
yeah, it's like when you have the confidence in God, you have assurance like no other. There's no what ifs or what was. It's based off of Psalm 37.
So good. So good.
Yeah, yeah. Um, One of the things that you talked about in your book, which I'm very passionate about, is, and John Mark Comer, who actually wrote the forward of the book, talks about this in his book. I think it's the Ruthless, something about
You
slowing
got it. The
down.
ruthless elimination of hurry.
Yes, thank you for that. And you talk about leaders making space for retreat, and I think this is a big issue. And I had bad experience with this. Is I was had that go 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 mindset and never took that time to slow down, never took that time to reflect, never took that time to, okay, let me hit the reset button this weekend, or let me just turn off my brain for or or get away for even if it's like a couple hours in the day, because sometimes in leadership especially, you're a servant, right? You're serving people, you're always doing something for others, whether it's the business for others, you're giving care for people, and it can become so much about others that you almost sort of lose sight of yourself. So I wanted you to talk about is how can leaders make this space for retreat? One, and then why is it so important for leaders to have this practice in their lives?
Yeah. Yeah. So Cameron, this may be related to what are we doing on a daily, weekly, annual basis, and just having a very clear way of thinking about this. And retreat. I mean, wait a minute. I don't even like the word retreat. No, I want to advance on that.
Yeah.
I want to keep moving forward. And yet, I think that even as you reference, I think there's a lot of people that have been giving a lot, have been going really hard, and have shallow or malnourished souls. And just like our physical body, if we are constantly, even if we're in the gym doing good things, eventually our body's going to say, if you don't rest, I'm going to tell you that you will rest. Um, and so I think it's really our choice. Do we want to have the ability to say, I need time to refill my soul? Or do you want life to happen and you get to a spot that you have no choice but to refill your soul? My guess is that day is coming either way. I just want to choose that day. I want to choose the time of retreat, of refreshing. And again, that ties directly to the example of Jesus. Jesus would get away for retreat, even though he had so many other things that he could have been doing. And I think in a similar way, if you've never done it, try it. Try it is the best advice I could give. If you've never had that moment to completely unplug, literally, unless you're, family emergency or something like that, physically detach yourself from any device. Physically, for me, get somewhere in nature and have simply this gift of wasting time with God, observing the world, and tell me at the end of that day, especially if you do it on some sort of a regular basis, if there is not a change in your breathing, there's not a change in the way you're thinking, and if you don't feel that there is a change in your soul. If we are addicted to our own adrenaline, it is only a matter of time before we have nothing left to give. And we just want to say, I think God wired us for rest, God wired us for retreat, and we ignore that to our own peril, really. So, yeah, anyway, and for those that have never tried it, like no matter how busy you are, it is possible. It absolutely is possible because there's a day that you're not going to be in your job anymore. So it is possible to just unplug. And for me, I try to do it just 2 times a year, 24 hours. Literally, that's it. And it makes an impact truly in my soul. So if you've never tried it, try it. You might just be positively impacted in ways that might surprise you.
Yeah, just in my experience of finding retreat, it was about 3 years ago. I went on my first actual retreat. It's actually the Oak Center that's owned by Bob Goff out in San Diego, California. So I went there 3 years ago. It was the most uncomfortable thing I've ever done, but I got so much out of it. And now that is my annual where I go once a year. It's not the same time every year. It's usually, at a point where I feel I need it, then I'll go to this place, and it's just so great to not only take care of yourself, because I think that's what we lose sight as leaders is we don't look after ourselves, not just ourselves physically, and but also taking care of ourselves mentally, spiritually, and really not losing sight of ourselves, because I'm sure there were leaders that you're talking to is at times they might have reached this all the success and fame or influence, and they probably lost sight of themselves, and taking that time and having retreat as a part of your rhythm, whatever that might look like. And I think it's different for everyone. Some things work for others, and some people can unplug for a weekend, some people it's only for a day, but having that as a part of your rhythm, especially in a leadership role, is so essential. And I've seen the benefits of it now. Just finished my third retreat last month.
Yeah, I would say more on that. Which to me, exactly what you said is true for so many that try it. Awkward, difficult, and yet
Yeah.
really meaningful and profound. Say more on what actually was that experience, and why do you think that is?
Well, I'll talk to you about one of the things. The big thing was technology. So at this retreat, you have the option to decide what you want to do with technology because obviously everyone has different situations, and I had the pleasure as a single man, not really tied to anything. I could unplug. So I talked to my family and unplugged, and it was very uncomfortable because I felt unplugged. So for the first 24 hours, I was a wreck because I didn't know what to do with myself. And I felt very restless because I always was so used to that rhythm of doing, like, oh, I need to do something. I need to do emails. I need to do, but actually just be. The facilitator, Stephanie, she talked about you just be and just and follow your body what it needs. If you need to sleep all day, sleep all day. If you want to go on an adventurous hike, you go and go on adventurous hikes and spend time with God. And it was so refreshing, like spiritually and mentally. It was such a transforming experience, and that's where I think I re-met God at that point because at that point I don't think it was a priority in my life, and that's where I became a realization where my walk with God maybe was not the way it should be. And so I was able to take that time for self-reflection, and I'm not a self-reflection type of person either, but taking that time to reflect and journal and dive into the word, and instead of reading the Bible, how the Bible read you is such an amazing experience. So I highly recommend it for leaders to have that cadence of retreat.
That is so fantastic.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing that.
for sure. Yeah. Um, so Peter, I know there might be some leaders or people that are listening and they may not have the proper spiritual habits in place. They may be busy. They may be just like, it's been such a challenge to keep faith at the forefront. What would you say? What would you say to those that are listening or watching? Small steps that people can take to really start building out this prayer life, the building up these spiritual habits for those that they are people of faith, but they truly just haven't, it's not at the top of mind, nor is it at the top of their priority list in their day to day.
Yeah, on a very concrete and practical level, I'm so grateful. So Ryan Skoog, um, he created these prayer prompts just written on cards and made them available for anyone else that would like to try them. So if you can go to leadwithprayer.com, you can see these prayer prompts. We also partnered with the Echo app as well, and it has a facilitated plan. I love the app, by the way. For the first time in my life, when I say I'll pray for you, I actually write it down and I do pray for it with 100% consistency on that, which I am so thankful for. So there are some tools. If you don't know where to start, this is the benefit of some simple tools. So I'd start with that prayer, those prayer prompts, and some of them there's just a whole bunch of one sentence prayers. Don't know where to start. Here's some one sentence prayers to be aware of. Maybe you try one each day and just have that a little bit more awareness on that. So I would say that might be helpful. It certainly was helpful for me. If you don't know where to start, a facilitated guide of these prompts, really, really helpful. And then maybe the other thing is we know this from Atomic Habits and some other books similar, but to create these habits, and for me, it's just a real simple thing of like I want to start every day in prayer. I want that to be one of my keystone habits every day. That's how I'm starting the day. Not my phone, not my email, not any news feed. I want to start my day in prayer, and that alone that alone changes the way. One of the people we interviewed talked about how he just wants to start a day making sure his soul is in his words, my soul is happy in the Lord. And he said, because then I know I'm not going to be pursuing the other things for that meaning, satisfaction, happiness. I'm going to start my day being reminded that I am a child of God, dearly loved. And that's my identity. That's how I'm starting my day. And yeah, anyway, so some real simple things, but I'd encourage anyone that wants to take the next steps. If you go to leadwithprayer.com, whole bunch of things available there.
Awesome. And for those listening, leadwithprayer.com, that link is in the podcast description on whichever platform you're listening on, and also on YouTube as well. So definitely get those resources, Peter. Those are awesome, awesome resources that I think it really can help someone that's really struggling to find some direction in terms of building those spiritual habits. So awesome. And also, of course, we want people to get a copy of the book, leadwithprayer.com as well. We want people to get a copy, and it's an amazing book that is packed with just so much content that I feel like every leader, no matter what sphere you lead in, you need a copy of this book. And as we wrap up, Peter, I do have some rapid fire questions just so our listeners can get to know you a bit more. And these are just some fun faith questions, since this is more of a faith podcast, just to get to know you more and your insights on some of these questions as well.
Let's do it.
Awesome. So some insights on yourself. What are some of the things that you do to help grow your faith?
Oh, I mean, how could I say anything else at this point in the interview other than say like prayer,
Yeah.
like time and space is that absolutely has impacted my understanding of the presence of Christ in my life. Yeah, so I would say that's it right now. That's a big one.
Awesome. And then what is the thing that continues to challenge you in your journey of faith?
Yeah, so I think about the work that we do and the fact that we are global. And so one of the things that has been so helpful and challenging me is to just, even though I'm not working on a book on this anymore, but just to learn from others. I think there is a wealth of experience. And sometimes the questions that we ask, I mean, this is what you're doing in your podcasting, but the gift of saying, I would love to hear more of your story. What have you done that has helped you in your journey of faith? And then to try when you hear something new or something that sticks, try it out in that. So I don't know. That's maybe one way of I truly am challenged. One of the things that most recently, fasting is not been a part of my spiritual habits or practices. That has not been a part. And it's so commonplace by my brothers and sisters around the world. And so try it. See if that actually helps sharpen our mind, deepen our prayers.
Hmm.
So anyway, overall posture of like, let's keep listening to others where God is at work, and let's try some things that might stretch us. And for me, just the recent example of fasting is certainly one of them.
Awesome. Next question is, what is one piece of advice you can provide to the next generation of believers?
Yeah, so I think the one thing that I would say for the next generation is um, have as much focus, intentionality on your spiritual growth as you do any other part of your life in leadership. You, it takes work to grow in Christ. If you follow the path of drift, it does not take you to a place of more faithfulness, does not take you a place of more zeal for the Lord. So don't be afraid. Like this is supposed to take work. It's supposed to be difficult. So let's approach it with a sense of, yeah, I want to train my soul. I want to I want to train my body. I want to make sure I'm taking good care, and I want to actually do the work to grow spiritually as well. And I think sometimes, again, we think that it just should happen or that, but I don't see that. And that certainly is not my experience. It takes work, it takes focus. So let's not be afraid of it. let's just do it. Let's see. And let's see if it does make an impact in our souls.
That's great. That's great. And final question for the rapid fire. What is your hope for the future of the church?
I mean, come on, we have the best hope ever, where Jesus said the gates of hell will not prevail against it, right? We know the end of the story. So I think like uh, be of good cheer, take
Mm,
heart, be people of courage, remember how the story ends, and live differently today as a result. That's what I would say. Um, yeah, that's what our hope is because the victory is in Christ. The end of the story is so glorious. And so let's be ready for the journey in the here and now. Yeah, so that's what gives me hope.
awesome. And last words of encouragement to our listeners as we come to a close.
I would just say, if we could be of any help, let us know. We love being on the journey with others. And so, yeah, I mean, you can find contact information at leadwithprayer.com. You can reach out to me at peterkgreer.com as well. But if there's anything that we could try and do to be helpful to our friends, to others on the journey, I mean, we really do believe we are on this together. And the collective witness of the church, according to John 17, the collective witness matters to the way that the watching world sees, yeah, Christ in our world. So let's see this as a journey that we're on together, encouraging one another and not giving up. Yeah, until the day that we're home. So that's what I'd say. Let us know if we could try and be of any help. We really do believe that we're on the journey together and that we need each other.
Awesome. Well, Peter, thank you so much for this conversation. And thank you so much for being a part of this book project and actually doing all the work to really package this. And because I think it's such a unique book that you and your friends have put together. And it's so much needed for leaders in our world today. So thank you. And thank you for a gracious time.
Oh, I've so enjoyed it. And thank you for the work you do as well. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Thanks, Cameron.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Divine Revelations Unleashed. Hope you enjoyed this interview with Peter Greer. And if you want to get your hands of a copy of Lead with Prayer, The Spiritual Habits of World-Changing Leaders, you can find it on anywhere where books are sold. And also the links are in the podcast description or on YouTube, whichever platform you're listening or watching on. Definitely get your copy if you want to learn more and take a deep dive into this book. And if you want to find out more about Hope International, you can find out more at the link also in the podcast description or on YouTube. Feel free to catch up on some of the previous episodes that we've had on the podcast. And thank you so much for tuning in and listening. You can also find the links to connect with the podcast via social media. You can go to my website, CameronSingh.com, if you would like to connect with me or connect with me on social media as well. And I hope this is helping grow your faith wherever you're at in your journey of faith, and really hope that this is adding value to you. And thank you so much again for tuning in. Feel free to like, share, subscribe, and thank you again for all your support and for tuning in. And we'll catch you next Thursday for another brand new episode of Divine Revelations Unleashed. Take care.